Rifka. It begins on page 120. Make sure you're following along. Our Pushkin quote is kind of lengthy today, but I want you to think about the emotion and just kind of what might be coming. Remember, we foreshadow with Pushkin. O mournful season that delights the eyes, your farewell beauty captivates my spirit. I love the pomp of nature's fading dyes, the forests, garmented in gold and purple, the rush of noisy wind, and the pale skies, half hidden by the clouds and darkling billows, and the rare sun ray and the early frost, and threats of grizzled winter, heard and lost. Pushkin. Doesn't sound great, right? Mournful season, farewell beauty captivates my spirit. Let's see what happens. October 14th, 1920, Ellis Island. Dear Tova, Ilya got me into such trouble today. We were walking through a part of the hospital we didn't know very well. We heard the da-da-da-da of a machine. Ilya loves machines. He dragged me over to the place where some men were working on a balcony overlooking the harbor. I stepped closer to the workmen. One of them used English words I hadn't heard before. I don't think they were words Mama would want me to learn, but still I was curious. All of a sudden I realized Ilya was missing. He is never more than a step or two away from me. Now, for the first time in weeks, he had disappeared from my sight. I rushed toward the balcony, calling for him. A little boy could easily fall over the edge into the water. I ran from the balcony to the hallway, then back again, fretting and rushing. The workmen stopped their hammers and to stare at me. It took a moment for the sound of their machines to stop inside my head, but then, in the silence, I heard Ilya's voice, high voice crying out. I turned toward the sound. There stood a row of metal toilet stalls. It was from the stalls that Ilya's voice came. Inside one, I found him. He had his back to me, and clouds of white paper flew over his head as if some great white bird were descending on him. But it was no bird. Ilya was unrolling toilet paper, an endless ribbon of it. As he unwound it, he laughed wildly. He cried, "Paper! Paper!" I scolded him in Russian. I yelled for him to stop. "Look what you were doing, Ilya. You were going to get us killed. Look how you're wasting the paper." Top of 122. I grabbed his arm, holding it away, while frantically I started rolling the paper back. I was trying to wind it up so no one would punish us, and I was yelling at him in Russian. One of the workers started toward us. He pushed his big arm into the stall past me and Ilya. The worker ripped out the roll of toilet paper, throwing it over the rail and into the harbor. The white tail of Ilya's unraveling sailed over our heads and disappeared beyond the balcony. The worker looked as though he would pitch us into the harbor. Well, I grabbed Ilya and I ran with him so fast he cracked his shoulder against a wall. I didn't stop to comfort him. "We're going to get killed," I cried, pulling him, checking over my shoulder every few seconds to see if the man was chasing us. "Don't you ever do that again," I told Ilya, trying to catch my breath. We collapsed on my cot. Nurse Bowen came over. Ilya held his shoulder and wept. "What happened?" the nurse asked, examining Ilya's shoulder. "Promise you won't tell Mr. Fargate," I asked. "Promise you won't let him send us back to Russia." "Tell me, Rifka," the nurse said. "Ilya unrolled toilet paper," I said, believing Ilya had committed one of the worst offenses he could ever commit here. So time out. This tells you about what Russia was like, right? To live in fear of wasting paper. Does it make sense now why Rivka wouldn't have a book on her own to write in, like a journal, but she uses a book to record her thoughts, right? So, believing Ilya had committed one of the worst offenses he could ever commit here. "Toilet paper?" the nurse asked. "What are you talking about, Rivka?" I told her about the stalls and the workmen. Nurse Bowen started laughing. "This is not funny," I told her. "In Russia, to waste paper is a terrible crime." "Well, in America, it's not, Rivka," Nurse Bowen said. "There is plenty of paper. Toilet paper, newspaper, every kind of paper. Don't worry, we're not going to send you back to Russia over a roll of toilet paper. She told me to tell Ilya that his shoulder would be fine. Already he had stopped crying. Nurse Bowen went away, still laughing. I felt a little insulted that she should laugh at me, but if paper was not so precious here, maybe it was a little funny. Maybe. And maybe I could get some of that plentiful paper Nurse Bowen talked about to write on. Ilya slid the pushkin out from under my pillow. He handed it to me to read to him. I said, No pushkin. I'm going to write a poem of my own. So here, she has been very careful to use the Pushkin book as so that she doesn't ruin it, so that you can still read the Pushkin poetry, but also it hasn't been to, it's been to record her journey, not to be creative with, right? So top of 124. Remember, Tova, when I said I might try? Well, I've been writing a little in the back of our book. There is hardly any room left between my letters to you and my poetry, but still I keep writing, sometimes even in English. It is not very good poetry. Mostly it doesn't rhyme, but I write anyway. I write poems about Russia and Bubby Ruth.
National Junior Honor Society is meeting in Mrs. Wilcox's room right now. National Junior Honor Society is meeting in Mrs. Wilcox's room right now.
I write poems about Russia and Bubby Ruth and you and Hannah and coming to America and Ellis Island. I asked Nurse Bowen for some of that paper she was talking about. She gave me a handful. A handful of paper, Tova. The paper alone is enough to draw the words from inside me. Okay, the paper alone is enough to draw the words from inside me. So we kind of have a metaphor here. And we also have a personification, right? So the paper isn't doing anything, but she's saying that it's like almost begging her for a conversation. I took the paper and her pushkin outside. Ilya, of course, followed behind me like a shadow. So there we have a simile. It is pretty here on the island. Across the harbor, tall buildings stand like giant guards, blocking my way to Mama and Papa. Okay. Tall buildings stand like giant guards is a simile. I fear those guards will never let me pass, yet even in my fear, I cannot deny the beauty of this place. Now here, just like we've seen with Karen Hess before, she takes it from a simile, tall buildings stand like giant guards, to an implied metaphor where she says those guards will never let me pass. So she's talking about the buildings and the people in there, right? Yet even in my fear, I cannot deny the beauty of this place. The leaves change color just as they do in Berdichev. Geese fly overhead, honking, forming and reforming in the blue sky above Miss Liberty. The sun feels warm on my shoulders, and the smell of autumn tickles my nose. Personification. My writing maybe is not as beautiful as Pushkin's, but it comforts me. Ilya likes it too. He makes me read my poems. He makes me read my poems over and over to him. It is nice to have an audience. You didn't know I would turn out to be a poet, did you, Tova? Is that being clever? Shalom, my cousin, Rifka. Okay, so chapter 19 is included in these three chapters, so it'll be 19, 20, 21. If you want, you can draw a picture from this chapter. You can definitely go ahead and answer the first question here, right? So what is the lesson that Rifka expresses in the October 14th chapter? So that's the chapter that we just read. You'll want to go ahead and restate the prompt. I'm going to put that in here for you so that you know what you're doing. So you're going to say the lesson that Rifka learns or expresses, however you want to put that, in the October 14th journal is, and then go ahead and answer that. So she learns what is plentiful in America. So it would be paper, right? And then the other part of this lesson that she learns is that some of the things that, you could get killed for in Russia are not things that are so severe here in America, right? So go ahead and answer that question. And then the other thing is, if you skip down to the bottom, it says, across the harbor, tall buildings stand like giant guards. Let's see, I'm going to try to highlight here. Okay. Whoops, that's not what I want. What's my tool? Yeah, here, let's just circle it. Okay, so they stand like giant guards, okay, blocking my way to Mama and Papa. So here we have definitely, hoping, okay. So we definitely have a simile, right? And then in a way, we kind of have a personification because the buildings aren't doing anything. What type of figurative language can be found in the first sentence? It's got that like or as, so is it a simile, metaphor, hyperbole, personification, or is it a alliteration? Okay, I know my words went off the page. Here, let's bring it back over here. So which one is it that you would answer here? From this quote, what does Rivka feel is standing in her way? So it's, hopefully you figured out these are the people in the just New York City in general, right? And then what type of figurative language can be found in the second sentence? So I fear those guards will never let me pass. So we have where she's taken the buildings and taken it from a simile and turned it into like a personification, right? Because now the guards are never going to let her pass, the guards being the buildings, okay? So hopefully that will help you answer those questions. They do not need to be in complete sentences. They just need to be a quick 1 or 2 word answer, okay? So answer for October 14th. Like I said, you can draw a picture or you can wait. If you have questions, please let me know.